Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to set the timer because we continue to run on. So I'll just set this. And it's actually going to be for a warning. But we're delighted to be here, and thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. We were talking that this is actually a year since we were on the Camino. A year ago now, we were on the Camino. And this is a really wonderful opportunity for us to revisit our experience and then share it with you. So thank you for really being here and letting us do that.
And I just want to say that thank you all for coming to be witness to these two elderly dames that took a long walk.
So has anybody here ever walked the Camino? Okay, I thought there was going to be a couple people who might have, but okay. So you won't know whether we're lying or not. So tonight, what we thought we would do, we thought it would be more helpful to you to address some of the topics that we get asked the most about, rather than give you a travelogue. So we thought we would talk a little bit about giving you what is the Camino, how we were called to do this, the many ways to do the Camino, the challenges that we faced and some of the other people faced, what kind of relationships we experienced when we were on the Camino, the inner process that we went through, then arriving in Santiago, and then we went to the end of the world, which we'll tell you a little bit about, and then talk a little bit about the aftermath and the re-entry into our real lives. So we'll start with what is the Camino. So how many of you knew about the Camino or who had some experience before? Oh, yay, great. So you know that this is an ancient Catholic pilgrimage. It's really been around since 900. So people have been walking these trails for over 1,000 years. And in 900, one of the bishops in Spain declared that they had found the bones of St. James. And you know that St. James, this is St. James the Greater, had actually preached in Spain right after, in the early days of Christianity. And then he went back to Jerusalem. He was martyred there. And then they put his bones in a boat and sent him across the Mediterranean. And apparently it ended up in Spain. So his bones are interred in the cathedral in Santiago, which is in northwest Spain. So Santiago, or the Camino, is actually translated into English as the way. So there are trails from all over Europe, and you'll see in this map that there are some of them, but they go all the way to Jerusalem, to Rome, Northern Europe, Russia, and they all come together almost like a clamshell. So all the pilgrims along the way carry these clamshells because all roads go to Santiago, just like in the clamshell. So in Spanish, Santiago is St. James, and that's why Santiago has that name. So the most popular Camino is the Camino Frances, and that's the one that goes from southern France in the Pyrenees and goes all the way across northern Spain to Santiago, and it's a distance of about 500 miles. So since the Camino has been so old and there's such a tradition, we found that there's a very long tradition of hospitality along the Camino. So there's from the hostel people, the people who live along the Camino. It's just a part of the whole thing, and we experience that a lot. So it was just wonderful. There's food and lodging all along the way, and they're all within reasonable and walkable distances. So there are some stretches that are long, but it's easy to get to.
So Holly and I both had our own reasons for taking this journey. And I have written something here. For me, two events came together in the year 2000. First, I read a book by Shirley MacLaine, The Camino, A Journey of the Spirit. The book provoked for me an inner examination of what was essential to me, and I wondered if a long walk or a pilgrimage would answer that question for me. Second, I took a workshop in New Mexico with Meinrad Craighead, and while I was there, I wrote a poem, and it's titled The Call. Oh, ancient spirits, I feel your call. Back down I go into the womb of my creation, where God has watched my bones take shape. I come forth now in form, with hands and heart, to do your bidding. I am yours. In 1993, Holly and I trekked in Nepal for a month. It was Holly's dream, and I followed. Last year, Holly hopped on board mine. Arriving in Barcelona, Spain on my 71st birthday, I was aware of some part of me that wanted and needed to prove I was up to the physical challenge of walking 500 miles plus in 34 days. One of the ways I navigate this life experience is to be very aware and connected to my body. Many life lessons learned this time around have been body-centric. So the idea of walking, step by step, these many miles seemed a natural expression of my essential being. My ego was excited too. Looking good, doing something out of the ordinary, and succeeding. All was juice for my ego. For 13 years, a small clipping from a news article with the words Santiago de Compostela rested in an ornamental envelope on my altar. For some years, it was forgotten until 2012, and I met a couple who had just returned from the walk. I remembered the envelope, the clipping, the time was right, and the dream developed wings and took off.
So you can see these pictures that we have here are with our almost virgin passports when we first got to the beginning of the Camino. We get a passport. These passports actually allow us to stay in the albergues or the hostels along the way at a substantially reduced rate. So we get it stamped, and we actually have our passports up here, so you can see it's completely full by the end. So although I was invited by Diana to join her on this Camino, eventually I realized that I was called also to do this. And we met a lot of people on the Camino who said they didn't realize, they didn't know why they were doing it, but they knew that they were called. And so I felt definitely that I was called. And I'm very happy that Diana is a very patient person, because we've been talking about this for over 10 years, and we knew we were going to do it. And I wanted to retire before I did this, because I didn't want to have a rush back to do something else. And my father died in January of last year, and it just seemed like a really good time for me to have a long walk. And I was fairly clear about my intentions before I left. One of them was to pare back the need for things. Since we were carrying everything we would have for 34 days, I would need to really select judiciously, and I knew it would be very little. I wanted to see what it was really needed to live comfortably. And like many Americans, I have a love with stuff, and I wanted to not have it define me. And we brought one of our backpacks here, so you'll see the size of what we had, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I knew, so another one of my intentions was to be very present. One of the things about the Camino is you can't plan every day, because you don't know where you're going to go, you don't know where you're going to end up, you don't know where you're going to have dinner, where you're going to sleep, and so you have to be very present. And of course, a lot of the trail is sometimes rough, and you have to be present as you're going along. So it was just, my intention was to be present and open up to grace, and let the everyday magic of the universe take its course for me. And another intention was that I was ushering in my age of delight, so I wanted to just have a good time on this adventure and just slow down and enjoy each moment. And one of the things that I realized that there was nothing to accomplish each day except putting one foot in front of the other and just being present. So that was the big thing. My last intention was to take an attitude of gratitude with me and find the blessings in everything, particularly the small and unexpected things. And this was a much easier way for me to walk because some of the walking was very difficult. Some of it was very hard when we were going up or when we were going down. And when it really got hard, I could be grateful that my feet were working, that my legs were working, that I was in a really beautiful place, and there was plenty to be grateful for.
So here we are. Stand up here. So here we are, getting started. Holly and I in her driveway with our backpacks very cozily in bags so that they would make the trip as easily as we did. We landed in Barcelona and decided to give ourselves about a week to get over jet lag. And so we did. And the picture down at the bottom is Holly and I have arrived in Saint-Jean, which is in the Pyrenees, and is where we began our pilgrimage. The picture on the right is about an hour or two into the first day. We're feeling pretty frisky, and yeah, it's all looking like it's going to be great fun.
So there are many ways to do the Camino. The slide on the left is a fellow named Tony that we met, and a lot of people bicycle this. Some people do road bicycles, some do dirt bikes, and it takes about 15 days to go from the Pyrenees to Santiago on a bike, and it sounds pretty brutal to me, and we met one group that was on horseback, and most people carry their packs. And then there's this gentleman on the lower right who was carrying his stuff behind him. We saw a couple of people doing that. But I think the most important thing about the many ways to do the Camino is that the Camino is really a microcosm for life. And there are many ways to do life. So along the trail and along the path that we're each moving, is that everybody's doing it a little bit differently. We found that people can come for different reasons. Some people are trying to sort something out in their lives. Some people have gone through some major transition in their life. Some people are trying to figure out if they're going to continue to work or whether they're going to change careers or do something else. Some people are trying to get over a death. So there are many ways, and one of the things that we realized that we all can't judge. Everybody's on their own path, and we can't judge how people are doing the Camino. So one of the things that Diana and I decided early on, and that was because we were kind of coached to take it easy in the first few days, was not to carry our packs, but to send them ahead, because we were going pretty much straight up the first couple of days. And so we wanted to conserve our physical strength and our bodies. And, some people were real purists and say you have to carry your pack your whole time. There are some people who also go with suitcases and they send their suitcases ahead. And so there are many ways to do the Camino, and what we learned was not to judge that.
So this is a picture of the end of the day. When you arrived at an albergue, which is where we stayed at night, the first thing you had to do is take your boots off because they really didn't want any mud in there. Don't blame them in their place. And the picture on the right is a typical municipal albergue where we stayed. It was actually quite a nice one because we had places where we could plug in our iPad and get some juice. The picture on the left, when we arrived at the end of the day, we tried to finish our day around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We had to do our laundry because we're only carrying 2 sets of everything, one for the day and one for the night. So first thing was laundry, next thing was a cold beer, next thing was a nap and a shower. And the picture on the right, now sometimes you only had a couple of daylight hours left, so your laundry was wet, so you wore it on your pack during the day and it dried. This was the challenge of challenges, the feet. I personally went through 4 pairs of shoes. This is Holly's foot, and one of the ways you take care of a blister is to thread a thread through. And we got to be very good at that. And it became a ritual in the evening when we got where we were going, and it was the first thing we bandaged our feet, the first thing in the morning so we could get on the road.
Yeah. So blisters were a common affair on the Camino for almost everyone. There are other challenges, and in addition to managing the pain, well, you didn't talk about the drugs.
Oh, drugs. The drugs are very important. Advil, we went with a good supply of Advil, but we found that Spain, you could get right over the counter something that was like 600 milligrams per pill. So we would definitely buy a piece of fruit at night so that we could, first thing when we got up, we had our fruit, took our pill, bandaged our feet, and by the time we were walking out the door, half an hour later, we felt really good.
So in addition to managing the pain on our feet, and actually once you start walking, you forget about the pain. It was just totally amazing. There was a lot of rough road, and we found that going down was the hardest. And thank goodness we had poles, so we carried our poles. And there were some rough climbs. You can see some of the rough terrain that we had to go through. So in addition to the physical challenges, there was also some emotional challenges of letting go of things, like not having a hairdryer, like not carrying makeup, like not having a morning ritual like I'm used to at home, those kind of things. So we had to let go of a lot of that kind of things along the way. Those are things we think are necessities, and they aren't actually. Sorry.
Another challenge, which we really didn't experience too much of, which was rain near the end of our journey, but we had bought these incredible ponchos that really kept the rain off, but the minute the sun came out, they were like a mini sauna. So it was on and off, on and off. One of the other challenges was the meseta, which you can see 2 pictures of on the right. No shade. That was they were very long, hot days. And one of the other challenges was where were you going to go to the bathroom? Hate to bring that up, but you might see one lone tree by the side of the road, and you would great, you'd go to get there, and you'd find out that thousands of people had already used it as a latrine. So, but we managed.
So one of the challenges that some people found on the Camino was that the meseta, which was a lot of days, long, flat, boring days, is people would say, oh, the meseta will break you. It's boring, it's really tough. But Diane and I both loved it. We had 75-degree days when we were on the meseta. We got a nice breeze, and it was just really nice to have that long time to think and to be in solitude as we were walking. So one of the other things we found was a sense of humor was really important. That could get almost through any kind of challenge that we might have. And sleeping with a lot of people in one room with their gear and having somebody on a bunk bed above us was a little tough. But we found, again, that drugs helped. So sleeping pills and earplugs. So we would be very tired at the end of the day. We'd put our earplugs in, take a sleeping pill, and we'd sleep through the night. So that was not a problem. The picture on the right is one of the typical bathrooms in one of the albergues we stayed in, and this one in particular there were a lot of places we stayed. There were men in the same room. Sometimes when we went to a monastery or something like that, they separated people, but mostly there was, first come, first serve. You get a bed, and it could be a man sleeping above you, or it could be somebody sleeping beside you, or whatever. And then there were shared bathrooms too. So I was brushing my teeth in this one morning, and I was just like surprised because a guy comes out of the toilet. He's in his full pajamas regalia. And it was like the first and only person we saw who took their pajamas on the Camino, because who would want to carry your pajamas? Most people slept in their underwear and their shorts, and nobody really cared. It was just perfect.
So the relationships that we made along the way, it was like we had a village. We created a village. We met people in the beginning of our trek, and we kept running into them. We might not see them for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden we would. Celebration, more beer, we sit down, we have a meal. So these are several of our very closest friends that we made enjoying each other, and there was such an incredible kindness. Everybody was looking out for each other. One of the women in the right-hand slide, one night I was not sleeping well, and she did Reiki on me, and I had the best night's sleep I had in the entire time I was on the trip. So it was a very important part of our trip, our relationships.
So one of the things about the Camino is that you get to know people pretty well, pretty fast. And like within 20 minutes or half an hour walking with somebody, you have a pretty good sense of their essence, and you know why they're walking. And people are very honest and very open about what they're doing. You'll see a lot of pictures of us eating because we'd stop on the way, and our days were just filled with this, as we said, the moving village. We kept running into people, and it felt like they were all good friends.
My favorite picture. To me, it looks as though that could have been another lifetime. Could have been taken 100 years ago of Holly and I together. I could not have done this trip with anyone but her. It was an amazing partnership. We were really able to be in our own strength, and we definitely did all of our own inner work. We didn't project out onto one another. Very often, Holly walked much faster than I did. I would be at least 20 or 30 paces behind her, and we could walk for hours in silence. And yet, we were a great team. We looked out for one another, and I'm forever grateful that she said yes to going on this trip.
Yeah, I love this picture too, and I think it was wonderful being with somebody who did their own work. And when we would kind of work through what we needed to work through, and then we would maybe talk to each other, but we found that we each had good strengths, and we played to those strengths. So we had like chores for the day. Like Diana was having a little trouble with her feet, so she chose how far we were going to go the next day based on her strength, and then we would plan out the next day. Then I would call the guys and say, "Tienes dos camas por esta noche," and that was about my Spanish, and I could do it on the phone. So I mean, we had I think one of the big things is faith that the other was going to show up and be there and be present. So it was really kind of wonderful. I think one of the other things that we would talk about is that, throughout our relationship, we are very different, and we each have strength, and we honor that. But sometimes we have judged ourselves by looking at the other and thinking, well, I'm not as good as she is, or, and so I think that we learned a lot about honoring ourselves as well as the other.
I agree. So, one of the things that we really like to do was to get up at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning, because we really like to be out ahead of everybody. And the picture in the top right was Leon in the morning, and the previous picture up on the right-hand side is the evening when we had dinner with all the friends. So it looks very differently in the early morning. So we would be up around 5:30, 6 o'clock. Sometimes we actually had to climb over fences and go out odd doors to get out of the places we were staying. But we enjoyed the sunrises, and while we were there, we had a full moon. So very often we had the sunrise and coming up, and we had the moon going down, and it was absolutely extraordinary. And when you get up at 5:30 and 6 o'clock and start to walk with your headlamp, but when you turn your headlamp on, the Camino is underneath the Milky Way, and the stars were extraordinary. It was amazing. We just would stand and just soak it in. It was really a lovely experience.
As Diana said, we liked those early mornings because we had the road to ourselves. It was a lot of solitude. And we usually walked about 2 hours before we stopped for breakfast. And we just go to a town, whether it be an open cafe or bar. And that time, we pretty much walked in companionable silence. And it was a little bit of a morning meditation time. And I would say that one of the things about that early morning, too, was that feeling the pull of Santiago. So it was like, when I'm home, I don't really feel like getting out of bed, but when we were on the road, it was like, let's get out of bed and let's get on the road, let's get going. So there was like this invisible hand that was behind us, but also the pull of Santiago. So it was like, let's get on the road, let's start walking, and then you just get into the rhythm of it. So another thing, when we stopped for breakfast, and is that we would usually take our angel cards and have our quality for meditation for the day. And we got to the point where when we get to a restaurant or bar or something, there'd usually be somebody we knew, or somebody had passed us on the way, or somebody would show up. So then we would be talking, and everybody would get their angel card. And people would say, have you done your angel cards yet? So we would do that, and that would give us something to do. So these are qualities, and we really loved it. And one of them we kept getting over and over again was obedience. And neither one of us liked meditating on obedience, so we threw it away.
There was a one-card rule, too. You could put back once if you didn't have your job. You got one more draw. So here, one of the wonderful, amazing things for both of us were all the sacred places that we came across. The slide on the left is a really beautiful garden in the middle of a monastery. And I decided when I went to take my mother's ashes, or at least some of them, and so I would leave them in certain places along the way. This was a place where I spent a lot of time. Definitely left her ashes here, because I know she would have done this walk had she been young enough and known about it. The little chapel up on the right, if you notice, there are a lot of orbs. Anybody that knows about orbs, there are a lot of them in that picture. We loved the beautiful cathedrals, were amazing, but the small chapels were really touched me particularly, and Holly. We could really rest there for a while and be very quiet and meditate. And the sculpture, the statue on the right, you would be out in the middle of, this was in the Pyrenees, and you would come around the corner and there would be this beautiful sculpture. that this was a sacred journey that I was taking, and I was reminded all the time of that.
So we did light a lot of candles in these churches along the way. So one of the things that as walking on the Camino, we found the holy and the divine in almost everything. So it was just so much beauty. And the picture on the upper right shows people had stacked stones in those stone cairns to mark their way or to leave their prayers. And so we saw so much of that. I think one of the things that was really good is when you're walking for 34 days, when you're walking day in and day out, is you really get to a human time. And going in a car seemed so alien at that time because we had slowed down so much. We had many gifts in abundance on this trip. But the picture on the left was a particularly tough day. It was the worst day that we had, I think, because we had, it was 93 degrees and we were walking across an area that had absolutely no shade, and as Diana said, we'd look down and be another kilometer or so and we'd say, oh, there's a tree, let's stop, and we'll stop and have our lunch there. And we get there and we find that it was a latrine. And so we couldn't have lunch. So we were walking and we were hot. We had our packs on us. My sciatica was acting up. Her feet were feeling totally ragged. And we had made a destination goal for the day. And we crossed a little bridge and we saw a sign and it said, Casa Magico. Magico in Spanish is magic. So we said, magic house, okay. So we went in there. This is Casa Magico. We walked in my faltering Spanish, I asked if there were dos camas. And she said, oh yes, come on in English. Come on in, take your boots off, put your poles up, here's some water. And of course there is. And then Diana took her shoes off, and she said, oh, your blisters look terrible. I'll make a call. She made a call at the clinic, and then she said, while you're at the clinic, I'll do your laundry. And at that point, I just burst into tears. It was like, that's the kind of kindness that we found all along the way.
So one of the other gifts was the grapes we saw a lot of. We saw them in the beginning of our trip when they weren't ripe, and then by the time we were done, they were ready to be picked. But the day in particular that I remember, Holly and I were walking along, and I said right out loud to Holly, I said, oh, I would give my right arm for a piece of fruit. Oh, it would be so great about now. And 10 steps later, there on the ground was the most perfect, beautiful plum. And there was a plum tree, and that was a typical, we asked and we received over and over and over. Sometimes it happened in 5 minutes, sometimes it happened in 3 hours, but it was always there was that support from above.
So one of the other things about the Camino is there's water all along the way. So there are water fountains, and each of the towns had public water fountains. Sometimes they had places where people could put their feet in. We saw a lot of people with their feet in the water. And the other thing we got to love is when we saw a sign for a bar. And that meant that we could probably get something to eat, and we'd get a cold drink, or we'd get a coffee or a hot chocolate or something. But it was plenty of places to get food and a little rest and see who else was there. So you'll see like a cafe on the bottom left.
So the slide on the right, we came up a very long, arduous hill, and at the top was this booth, and it was run by a man named David and his girlfriend, and they lived out in the middle of nowhere, and they provided the food and drink for the pilgrims. And we didn't know how they got the food there, but they literally just lived there. And I got to have peanut butter, and it tasted really, really good. But that was a very sort of so many people along the way have dedicated their life to supporting the pilgrims. Okay. So the picture on the left, obviously we're having our rest against a haystack, and just a little aside, I went behind to go to the bathroom and managed to get a little straw in my underwear and had to walk for the next 3 hours very discreetly trying to extricate the straw. But anyway, that was all just part of the whole thing.
So I think we've talked a little bit before about probably some of the biggest gifts and abundance that we had were the relationships that we were in. The two women that were on the upper right-hand corner were with us all the way from the beginning, and we kept running into them, and we of course saw them again in Santiago. They're from New Zealand. So having those kind of strong relationships through the whole experience, and then just hanging out at night or hanging out and putting our feet in the water together was just one of the things that everybody did.
So beauty everywhere. The landscape, every time you went over a hill or around the corner, you saw something new. It was breathtaking. And of course, the architecture in all of the towns, the cathedrals, it was a feast for the eyes. And the picture in the lower right was a very sort of bucolic, that was the second day on the period.
Sorry, that's okay. Go ahead.
I'm good.
You can go.
You go. Oh, yes. Okay. Now the slide on the left was a tea house or a tea garden in sculpture, and I am a sculptor, was extraordinary. And this particular one just really, I loved it. And I can say that I've actually come home and made several pieces that are really directly an influence of what I saw on this journey.
Yeah, the artwork was extraordinary. Every town had sculptures and things, and just along the way, as you see. And of course, as a gardener, I loved all the window boxes, and this espalier was particularly lovely. But there was just flowers, and it was beautiful.
So here we are. We're probably about an hour outside of our goal, Santiago. And the slide on the left are these two very, very large pilgrims that kind of stood high. And we were able to go up there, thanks to Holly, who I was done. I didn't want to take another step. And she said, "You are going to see these." And so we did. And it was so worthwhile because we could look over the whole town of Santiago and we could actually see the cathedral off in the distance. And the slide on the right is we're up, we're ready, and we're walking in.
So the third woman with us is Hannah from Denmark, and she was with us for the last 5 days of the trip, and we became very good friends with her. She's wonderful. And this is a cathedral in Santiago. It's absolutely beautiful and magnificent. And when we arrived in the square, all our friends were there. The people who had come the day before were waiting for us. So they knew we were coming, and it was just the most amazing experience. And they were so, I think they were all younger than we were, of course. And they were just amazed that we could do it, but it was just great to see everybody.
So definitely celebration that we had made it. It's hard to even describe the joy and the sense of accomplishment that we had. It was almost like pinching yourself, like, wow, we really did make it. The slides on the right are Holly and I getting our compostellas, which are the certificate. We had to show our passports in order to prove that we had actually walked the whole way, and
exciting things is there's a Pilgrim's Mass every day in the cathedral. And so it's held every day at noon. And one of the things that they have is this incense burner ceremony that goes, the incense. In the old days, the pilgrims would come and they were pretty smelly because they hadn't showered every day like we did. And so they had this incense for the cathedral. But it's just the most amazing and moving experience. We had, the Mass was conducted in Spanish, and the priests spoke in Spanish, but it was like transcendent. We knew what he was talking about, and it was just the most amazing Mass that I think I've ever been to. And when we saw the processional, we not only saw one of the pilgrims that we walked with from Germany, we didn't realize that he was a priest. And we saw him afterwards, and we said, you know, it was just really wonderful. And
and then the minister from the church locally was there. He had just finished walking the Camino, and it's like, well, it was just sort of amazing. I had to look several times to make sure it was really him.
So that was a real highlight. And then afterwards, of course, we celebrated with all our friends, and more food, more enjoyment.
So, this was another time when Holly insisted that we keep going, because from Santiago, this is Finisterre. This is the end of the world. I know, you know, she was amazing. You know, I was like, okay. I always got on board. It only took about 5 minutes, but she was like, we are going, and we're going to Sunset. And we tried filming a ride, but that didn't work. But we finally got there. So this is the end of the world. This is the very tip of, well, Holly's going to tell you.
Well, it's the westernmost part of Europe, and in the Middle Ages they called it Finisterre, and it was the end of the world, which was a very scary thing. Of course, it's the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So this mile marker there is the 0 mile marker, although this is 50 kilometers away from Santiago. We actually went by bus because we didn't have enough time to walk it, but a lot of people do walk it.
So Holly surprised me by bringing a beer out.
I know how to get to this girl's heart.
She knows. The pieces on the left were, when I left, I asked friends and family to give me a token that I could take with me, that I would have with me. It would be like them going with me. And they did, so I carried them all away. Now my intention was to sweep them into the water and leave them there, but I couldn't. So they're at home, and in my garden, in a very sacred place.
And I had no intention of giving up my amulets, but there is a tradition on the Camino to give up something or burn something at the end. So I decided that this poor stained shirt would go. So I burned that, and of course it's plastic, so it was just a plastic mess at the end.
Up. So here we are, sunset. The whole point of going out was to see the sunset. And they have the pictures on the right are Holly and I cradling a bronze boot. In the old days, people used to leave their boots and things there, but they don't do that anymore. And it's just a symbol of completion. We made it. So one of the things that Holly and I wanted to do was to, just give a little idea of what it was like to come back and kind of re-entry. Again, we each picked a picture that would kind of summarize that. And so here I am at rest. This picture is me at rest, conveys the feelings I had throughout the entire journey. Had I relied on my physical self only to walk 15 to 20 miles a day, I would never have completed the journey. I was so aware of the divine divine presence and my mother, holding me and us completely. There were times that I remembered to surrender and to rest in that presence. I knew above me hovered spirit and below me the energies of the millions of pilgrims walking before me were all there to support my dream. My body became a doorway to a deeper sense of alive quietness and the space of no mind. On arriving home, I was aware that I had brought the simple joy of that profound resting place, and it is still alive and well and informing my everyday moments. I'm grateful to discover I still have a direct link to this space of silence, of resting in Source that was so profoundly present on my walk.
So I chose this slide because it exemplifies my re-entry. Under dark skies, another path beckoned me, like David White's Santiago poem, which you'll hear in a few minutes. I had another Camino ahead of me, and many of you know that if you followed the blog, that my sister Hildy was in a horrific car accident about halfway through my walk. And after discussions with my family, I decided to continue walking because her physical injuries were so severe. They had to stage her surgeries and were keeping her in an induced coma. And other family members were there, and I would be more useful to be with her afterwards. The day after I arrived in the U.S., I was on a plane to Durham to see her. And the next week, I was back to prepare my house to leave for Durham indefinitely. I'm forever grateful for friends who helped me put my garden to bed, pack my greenhouse, take the chickens, and make it possible for me to leave my house and go to North Carolina. There was no processing time, just another Camino, although this time it was with what I could put in my car, including my cat. I don't think I could have done that Camino without the Camino experience. I had the same conditions. I had limited things. I had to stay present. I tried to enjoy what I could, and I was definitely grateful for each small victory she had. And in addition, I was living with her distraught husband. Unfortunately, 3 months after her accident, Hildy passed, and this completely rocked my world. I had come to Sister in a rehab to cheer her on, to be the driver, her arms, her legs, until she regained the full use of hers. And it was a devastating loss, and the winter was particularly dark and terrible. And I'm so grateful for the support of the communities that helped me through this time. Fortunately, spring worked its magic and brought renewal and hope. So here we are, a year later, and there's a modicum of closure in Hildy's death. This summer, I helped my brother-in-law dismantle his too-big house so he could move closer to his family. And I've begun the big clean-out in my own home. The Camino experience showed me that I don't need multiple sets of dishes, whole sets of extra pots and pans, books I've read, professional materials I no longer need, and countless other things that I'd save just in case, or because they reminded me of a time or a place. It feels great to let go of the baggage of the past and to lighten my load. Truthfully, I still have too much stuff, but it's a start. In spite of the loss of the last year, I still feel held and guided by Spirit and believe that everything has meaning in my life, and even the hardships are gifts. I continue to be grateful for just about everything, especially the little things. We'd like you to listen to this poem by David White about Santiago.
Santiago. The road seen, then not seen. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road dropping away from you, as if leaving you to walk on thin air, then catching you, holding you up when you thought you would fall. And the way forward, always in the end, the way that you followed. The way that carried you into your future, that brought you to this place, no matter that it sometimes took your promise from you, no matter that it had to break your heart along the way, the sense of having walked from far inside yourself out into the revelation, the sense of having walked from far inside yourself out into the revelation, to have risked yourself for something that seemed to stand both inside you and far beyond you, that called you back to the only road in the end you could follow, walking as you did in your rags of love and speaking in the voice that by night became a prayer for safe arrival, walking as you did in your rags of love and speaking in the voice that by night became a prayer for safe arrival. So that one day you realized that what you wanted had already happened long ago, and in the dwelling place you had lived in before you began, and that every step along the way you had carried the heart and the mind and the promise that first set you off and drew you on, and that you were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way. You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way. You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way than the gilded roofs of any destination you could reach, as if all along you had thought the end point might be a city with golden towers and cheering crowds, and turning the corner at what you thought was the end of the road, you found just a simple reflection and a clear revelation beneath the face looking back, and beneath it another invitation, and beneath it another invitation, all in one glimpse, like a person and a place you had sought forever, like a broad field of freedom that beckoned you beyond, like another life, and the road still stretching on.
So I think that poem sustained us, and other poems by David White. He wrote a book of poems called Pilgrim, and in that he clearly said that everyone in every life is a pilgrim. We are all pilgrims. And so he used different examples, and Santiago was one of them. But I love that image of when you get there, you found that you've already had it a long time ago, and that there's always another invitation to the next journey in our lives. So as they say on the Camino, Buen Camino. So it's a good way, good life, good Camino. We've put together a few resources, and most of them are up here. We don't have the Pilgrim book. He's on our computer, so we were listening to him on the trip. But I just want to say, too, that we both kept a blog, and so the blog information is on that handout that we have. And I finally put my blog into an electronic version of the book, so you can get that from Lulu. And there's, if you're interested, our contact information is there too. And then we are going to do this again in November 14th, and the information is in the back. So thank you so much for coming and for giving us this opportunity to share this with you.